piece of 3-inch angle iron with a 4x4 to set the tire on. Going to the come along, and the come along is hooked to my homemade timing tool to immobilize the exhaust camshaft. A 3-jawed gear puller. This is a cheap Chinese one, which is off angle a little bit here, so before you buy one of these you want to check on that. It results in not having the alignment is perfect right there, but it's workable. I drilled a little bit into the head of the torque wrench so I can set that in there securely. Now the DVD-ROM manual says 20 Newton meters, which is roughly the equivalent of 150 foot-pounds of torque onto that camshaft bolt. Clearly that's not going to happen. So what I've seen with the DVD-ROM manual is that a lot of times they say Newton meters, but you can kind of maybe translate it to being foot-pounds. So if they say 20 Newton meters, you can say, well, maybe about 20 foot-pounds. But in this case, obviously it's not 20 foot-pounds. It would have to be 120 foot-pounds. And my guess is that it's about 120 foot-pounds maximum. So if I go with that, I'm pretty sure that if I go with about 110 foot-pounds, so I don't exceed the supposed maximum, I think that'll be fine. And this is just finger tight, tighten it by hand. You don't need to get too much torque on the actual gear puller. Okay, now we go for the torque. And there we have it, 110. Okay, now we need to get the camshaft adjuster cover put back on. It's a little bit of a chore. First of all, one of my problems, I don't know if this is typical, but I've got 2 different size screws, and if you look closely on the cover, the guide pins for the gasket are for a couple of bolt holes that are recessed, and so it looks like the short screws go into that. However, because of the guide pins, the holes underneath are not threaded deep enough of those 2 holes, and consequently they'll strip out pretty easily at about 10 foot-pounds or so. So I'm going to try putting a longer bolt, because I stripped one of them a while ago, and so I'll put the longer bolts in there and see if I can get a grip on that. You want to try and line your vacuum pump up with the groove in your triple lobe, so that hopefully it'll slide right on there pretty easily, but otherwise you're just going to have to adjust the angle a little bit with a screwdriver and get it to fit on. Basically, the other thing I learned is that you don't want to tighten up your top bolts. You want to leave those loose by maybe 1/4 of an inch until you get the very bottom center one in there and tightened. I'm going to try for the impossible screw. I need a mirror, a light, and magnetic grappling tool. So see if we can find the recess and angle it in an upward direction. I don't know. Sure. I don't think so. Okay. There it is. Bingo. Got it in. There we go. Now we can thread it. Gee, I made it look easy, didn't I? After 8 times, it might seem easy, especially doing it in the cold. And such like. I'm only torquing these to less than approximately 10 foot-pounds, so there's no use having a torque wrench on it because it's aluminum. We're tightening into an aluminum head, and consequently they strip easy. So even though you want to tighten it, you don't want to tighten it because you don't want to strip very many of those, and that's why you use the sealant. I've given it 24 hours for the sealant to set up. Alright, so the problem at this point is the fuel pump. There's potentially a leakage problem, having recently broken those joints. So your battery, of course, is conveniently located right next to the fuel pump. So I have plugged the fuel pump back in under the rear seat, so that is operational now, so that when I plug the ground back onto the terminal here, it's going to start up the low pressure stage of the fuel pump. So the risk there is that, you know, you've got a potential fire hazard, because if you've got a leak, then you've got to pull off one of the terminals, or you might want to do that. But if you do that and you've got enough vapor to get right there, then you're going to have a fire, which is a problem. Consequently, you want to have a fire extinguisher somewhere nearby, and the idea is that you just would be better off if, having a leak, you would not pull the terminals, but rather go around and have your fuel pump set up so that your connection is exposed, and have your screwdrivers handy, because this doesn't come off rather inconveniently. You have to pry under that edge and under that edge after you pop the tab up in order to get that to disconnect. So if you have a leakage, then that's your best bet, is to disconnect it there rather than to risk a fire up front. So I'm leaving the intake air duct off so that I can see uh, the fuel connections here. This is the low pressure, which I didn't disturb, but nevertheless, it's a good idea to be able to see that. The high pressure stage is not going to likely, no, it won't leak here until you actually try to start the car. You do need to have the air box on there. That is, you need to have the sensor connected on the air box for the engine to continue running. However, you can set this off a little bit like that, and so you can actually get in here and take a look around for any possible leaks. But you will have to have that, what is it, a MAP sensor, mass airflow sensor or something like that. The battery was removed to do this procedure, and whenever the battery is removed, and when you reinstall the battery, you need to insert the key in the ignition so that the red button is still visible before you connect the battery, so you don't set off your alarm. The only other thing is that you're going to have to clear codes, your code reader down here, and you're going to have to clear the codes, otherwise you get TCM communication circuit, whatever, and it doesn't shift out a third, and you really don't want that. So yeah, you got to clear the codes if you're going to get the transmission to work for you. That's the way mine goes. So we have successful startup. You need to check for high pressure fuel leak in here, which appears to be fine. Everything looks good. Seems to be successful.